Rational expressions, add or subtract. How to add or subtract rational expressions. What are they? Rational expressions are expressions that are a ratio of two polynomials. Why? Helps to understand mathematical modeling. Interesting fact, young goats pick up accents from each other. Now, let's take a look at the examples we're going to discuss in today's video. Let's take a closer look at example 1. Now, let's read the steps. Step 1. Factor the top and bottom. Step 2. Create matching denominators. Step 3. Multiply each fraction if needed. Step 4. Combine fractions, then multiply. Step 5. Simplify. Now, let's read the question. Simplify the expression 1 over 4 plus 2 over 5. Now, let's start with adding fractions that don't have any variables and work our way up to ones that do. Let's write down the expression 1 over 4 plus 2 over 5 so we can show our work. Since we have proper fractions that are already in simplified form, we don't need to factor. What do we think is our next step? That's correct. We need to create matching denominators, or a common denominator. So let's find it. One method is to write down the multiples of 4, and then write down the multiples of 5, and find the first number in both sets. In this case, the number is 20. But that method does not work well with rational expressions. What's another way we can get 20 with 4 and 5? That's correct. We can multiply 4 and 5 to get 20. So let's multiply each fraction so we can get a common denominator. What do we think we should multiply 1 over 4 by? That's correct, 5 over 5. Now, what do we think we should multiply 2 over 5 by? That's correct, 4 over 4. Now, let's get rid of these multiplication signs and smash our terms together. Since we have 5 times 4 in the denominator for both fractions, we can combine them. So now we have 5 times 1 plus 2 times 4 over 5 times 4. Since we have just one fraction, let's multiply. 5 times 1 is 5, 2 times 4 is 8, and 5 times 4 is 20. So now we have 5 plus 8 over 20, and 5 plus 8 is 13. So now we have 13 over 20. That is example 1. Let's move on to example 2. Now, let's read the question. Simplify the expression 3 over 5x minus 4 over 5. First, let's find the factors of the numerators and denominators. For the numerators, we have 3 and 4. 3 is prime, and 4 is factor enough for this case, so we don't need to factor them. If you know how to factor 4, put it in the comments below. Now, let's take a look at the denominators by factoring 5x and 5. Let's start with 5x. How many different factors do you think we have with 5x? That's correct, 2 factors, 5 and x. Although we read it as 5x, it is really 5 times x. That's why we have 2 different factors. Let's continue with 5. 5 is prime, so we only have one different factor. Remember, we want a common denominator, so we can combine the fractions. So we want the 2 different denominators to match. Right now, one has 5 and x, and the other only has 5. So which factor do you think we need to multiply 5 by to get 5 times x? That is correct, x. So now, we have 2 different factors, and it matches the other denominator. Now that we have matching denominators, let's write down the expression 3 over 5x minus 4 over 5 so we can simplify the expression. What do we think is the first step? That's correct. We're going to multiply 4 over 5 by x over x so we can have matching denominators. Now, let's get rid of the multiplication sign and smash those terms together. What do we think is the next step? That's correct. We can combine our fractions since we have a common denominator. Now, we can multiply. In this case, we can just drop the parentheses. So now we have 3 minus 4x over 5x. That is example 2. Let's move on to example 3. Now, let's read the question. Simplify the expression 5 over 4x squared minus 8x plus 7 over 4x. First, let's find the factors of the numerators and the denominators. For the numerators, we have 5 and 7. Both 5 and 7 are prime, so we don't need to factor them. Now, let's take a look at the denominators by factoring 4x squared minus 8x and 4x. Let's start with 4x squared minus 8x. How many different factors do you think we have with 4x squared minus 8x? That's correct, 3 factors, 4, x, and x minus 2. That is because we can factor a 4x from 4x squared minus 8x to make it into 4x times the quantity of x minus 2. Wait, that looks like 2 factors. Well, the way we read it versus what is actually happening is different. That 4x times the quantity of x minus 2 is really 4 times x times the quantity of x minus 2. That is why we have 3 different factors. Let's continue with 4x. How many different factors do you think we have with 4x? That's correct, 2 factors, 4 and x. Although we read it as 4x, it is really 4 times x. That is why we have 2 different factors. So which factor do you think we need to multiply 4 times x by to get 4 times x times the quantity of x minus 2? That's correct, the quantity of x minus 2. So now we have 3 different factors, and it matches the other denominator. Now that we have matching denominators, let's write down the expression 5 over 4x squared minus 8x plus 7 over 4x, so we can simplify the expression. What do we think is the first step? That's correct. We're going to multiply 7 over 4 times x by the quantity of x minus 2 over the quantity of x minus 2, so we can have matching denominators. Notice how we already rearranged 4x squared minus 8x as 4 times x times the quantity of x minus 2. Now, let's get rid of that multiplication sign and smash those terms together. What do we think is the next step? That's correct. We can combine our fractions since we have a common denominator. Now we can multiply. Let's distribute the 7 to each term inside the parentheses. And 7 times x is 7x, and 7 minus 2 is minus 14. Now, let's combine like terms, and 5 minus 14 is minus 9. So now we have 7x minus 9 all over 4x times the quantity of x minus 2. That is example 3. Let's move on to example 4. Now, let's read the question. Simplify the expression 6 over x minus 4 minus 5 over x plus 3. First, let's find the factors of the numerators and the denominators. For the numerators, we have 6 and 5. 5 is prime, and 6 is factor enough in this case. If you know how to factor 6, put it in the comments below. Now, let's take a look at the denominators, x minus 4 and x plus 3. Let's start with x minus 4. Notice that we put parentheses around this term. This will help us later when we multiply. How many different factors do you think we have with the quantity of x minus 4? That's correct, 1 different factor, the quantity of x minus 4. Let's continue with x plus 3. Notice that we put parentheses around the term. This will help us later when we multiply. How many different factors do you think we have with the quantity of x plus 3? That's correct, 1 different factor, the quantity of x plus 3. Right now, our denominators do not match, so we need to multiply each side so we have a common denominator. First, let's multiply the left side by the quantity of x plus 3. Next, let's multiply the right side by the quantity of x minus 4. So now each side has 2 different factors, and they match. Now that we have matching denominators, let's write down the expression 6 over x minus 4 minus 5 over x plus 3, so we can simplify the expression. What do we think is the first step? That's correct. We're going to multiply 6 over the quantity of x minus 4 by the quantity of x plus 3 over the quantity of x plus 3, so we can have matching denominators. Notice that we put parentheses around each term in the denominator to help us when we multiply. What do we think is the next step? That's correct. We're going to multiply 5 over the quantity of x plus 3 by the quantity of x minus 4 over the quantity of x minus 4, so we can have matching denominators. Now, if we set the right side first and set the left side first, it's still correct. Now, let's get rid of the multiplication signs and smash those terms together. What do we think is the next step? That is correct. We can combine our fractions since we have a common denominator. Now, we can multiply. So let's distribute the 6 to each term in the parentheses and the minus 5 to each term in the parentheses. And 6 times x is 6x, and 6 times 3 is 18, and minus 5 times x is minus 5x, and minus 5 times minus 4 is positive 20. So now, let's combine like terms, and 6x minus 5x is x, and 18 and 20 is 38. So now we have x plus 38 all over the quantity of x minus 4 times the quantity of x plus 3. That is example 4. Now it is your turn, so go ahead and pause the video here so you can take your time to answer this question, and I'll show you the result in 3, 2, and 1. Did you get it correct? Fantastic. If not, there's always tomorrow.